Comic Timing is member supported by listeners like you over at patreon.com/comic timing. We thank you very, 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 very much for your continued support of the show in any way that you give it. For as little as $1 a month, you can join up and get some behind the scenes audio, get some early audio when we can do it, get some videos, get some diaries, get some comments and thoughts, and sometimes you can get the vote on things. So how about them apples? But yes, join it up for as little as $1 a month over at patreon.com/comic timing. Hey there, folks. My name's Ian Levinstein, and welcome to episode 243 of Comic Timing. And you might be thinking to yourselves, well, if you watch the video, you're probably not thinking it because you probably just saw what's happening. But you're probably thinking to yourselves, what are you doing talking to yourself today, Ian? Well, that's not really happening. This is the introduction, you see. The introduction to an episode where I have the honor and privilege to interview one of DC's finest right now. He just re-upped with DC Comics for his exclusive contract. And he is currently the writer of Aquaman, Green Lantern, and Green Lantern Corps over at DC. We also talk a little bit of Flash and go back in time on that with this. And, of course, mention Flash Gordon a little bit at the end. But I am, of course, talking about the one and only Jeremy Adams. And this was a damn fun interview. I could have talked to him for 3 hours, honestly. But this is a long time coming. Jeremy, as I say, once I get him on, we met up at New York Comic Con a couple of years ago, and he was walking around with Tim Sheridan, and we shot the shit for a couple of minutes, and it was an absolute pleasure and delight and a joy. And now I get to do it in the confines of the podcast. So really, really looking forward to you guys listening to this one. This was a hell of a lot of fun. And I'm really not going to preamble that much because there's interview to be had. So without further ado, I turn it over to myself and I turn it over to Jeremy Adams. And let's get this party started, shall we? All right, so here's an interview that I have had that kind of is a long time coming for me. One of the few creators who found me on the floor of New York Comic Con, not the other way around. So that was a nice good surprise for me. But the one and only recently re-upped with DC, Jeremy Adams. Welcome to Comic Timing, man. It's great to have you.
It's great to be here. Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm a nerd, so I recognize people.
hey, that's fine by me. I mean, look, it doesn't happen to me nearly as often as I'm sure it happens to you, but I'm walking home, oh shit, oh my God. I guess Facebook works as a reference tool every now and then.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. No, that's funny. The first time I ever got recognized outside, which is hilarious because I've done a bunch of animated stuff, but it wasn't until I started doing comics, like literally the first Comic Con after I'd started doing comics, I had seen a guy. I was out with Gary. And I basically seen a guy die at the Ghirardelli's chocolate. Like, he like fell down, and the ambulance came, and they were doing Cheshire, and it was traumatic, right? And the ambulance goes away, and man, within like 5 minutes, this guy goes, "Hey, are you Jeremy Adams?" And I'm still shook up. And this guy's like, "Hey, can we take a picture?" I'm like, yeah, sure. And I was totally taken aback. Like,
I'm sure the look on your face was still like a look of complete shock, but he probably has hung on his wall somewhere.
Yeah, totally.
Oh my God! Funny thing is, you said San Diego, right? Ghirardelli. Yeah, I know exactly where that Ghirardelli is because the 2 times I went to San Diego Comic Con, I stayed at a hotel like right around the corner from that Ghirardelli, and I had to stop myself from going in every single day to get some.
Sure.
So,
of course, and I was there, and it was like also the people that walked in were like, it was like Robert Kirkman, Liefeld, Jeff Loeb, like a bunch of those guys, and they were like all together. And I am my mentor, friend, co-writer Jim Krieg has really taught me to just go embarrass yourself, you know? So like I straight up just like, hey guys, I just want to tell you how much of a fan I am. Like, and they're all looking at me like, oh, who's this weirdo, you know?
Oh my God, I love it. Well, I mean, since you mentioned Krieg, I may as well start at quite literally the very beginning for anybody who hasn't heard an interview with you before and maybe wondering where your origins in comics come from. Let them know what got you into it as a kid and what got you into the industry to start.
Yeah, so you know, ironically, or not ironically, but interestingly, that my dad had drawn some comics when I was
Oh
growing
wow,
up.
nice.
And he had drawn a couple of DC things. He had drawn this thing called Ghosts in the 70s, a little
Okay.
bit. And then he did some Captain Atom in the 80s, which I did not know until much later. But so comics had always been in my life. And like I said, he hadn't drawn very much. But my parents were divorced when I was around 5. And psychologically, you can see, oh, my dad likes comics. And so therefore, I like comics. And then
Sure.
eventually it becomes your own thing, right? Because I didn't see him all that much. But I loved comic books and I loved film and television and all that stuff growing up. And I went to school for film and I moved out to Los Angeles and I was pursuing a career in film. And however you do that, which at the time, you know, I don't know if there's any way, like one way to do it. I definitely had no idea what I was doing.
Mhm.
But I wanted to be a writer, a director, all that stuff. And I was writing and for 10 years, man, nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like you do, you
No,
know,
well,
you just
do exactly. Yeah.
craving, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and I met Jim at a Doctor Who night. This
Love
guy
it.
that I mean, this story is like weirdly religious and strange, so I'm just going to say it anyways. But
Okay.
he was at a Doctor Who night, and we were watching. Somebody was getting these bootleg, I think they're bootleg versions of the Chris Eccleston on the reboot,
Okay.
and we were watching them, and you know, getting to know people. And Jim's like, "What do you want to do?" And I was like, "Oh, I want to be a writer." And he's like, "I'm a writer." I'm like, "Sure you are," you know, because that's everybody's a writer in LA, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And you know, whatever, he wanted to read something of mine and I gave him some script and I remember him saying like, this is crap, but it's like the good kind of crap. Like that's literally what he told me. And so time went by
Hmm.
and I was going to this church out here and there was a sermon on Moses and the burning bush. And I
Ooh.
remember going like, man, that's what I need. I need a burning bush to tell me how to get to Egypt or whatever. You know, I need something. And my wife's like, you should pray about it. I'm like, yeah, okay, sure. You know,
Mhm.
but I will because nothing else is working. And the next day I get a call from Jim and he's like, hey, I know this is weird. I think God wants me to be your mentor and I want to put you on a show, but I need you to do these things. And he gives me like a quest, like 3 quests to do. And
I'm imagining Mel Brooks with the 15,
I
10
know, 10
commandments.
commandments, yeah. And he was a great thing that he did because he said the quest, the like things that he wanted me to do were like, I want you to take an extension course at UCLA,
Yeah.
and I want you to do this. And the reason he did that, and he told me this years later, was he had a lot of people asking for help,
Sure.
but a lot of people he found out that said they wanted to be writers just really wanted to say they're writers. They wanted the
Right.
adoration or whatever. They didn't want to put in work.
Yeah.
And so he used that as kind of a filtering mechanism. And so there, yeah. So my first credit was on Green Lantern, the animated series, some, you know, billion years ago.
Wow, but the way you put that is absolutely true because I mean, like there are aspiring creators or
Yeah.
aspiring writers, and then there's people who are actually willing to put that next step in and do
Yes.
what it takes to get to that next level. And clearly, congratulations on making it to that next level.
Well, you know what was really, I mean, every writer will talk about it. Like
Yeah.
Stephen King's book on writing is such a huge influence on us.
Mhm. Yeah.
And when you read it and you see that Stephen King is like, I clock in at 8 and I write all day. And you're like, oh, this is why he puts out a novel every month, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And I knew I was just too lazy. I couldn't do that. But I could do an hour. And that's what I committed myself to. And once I did that, I started turning out scripts. The reality is, if I didn't have anything for Jim to read,
Yeah.
probably wouldn't be having this conversation. And I can't tell you how many people I know, they have one idea and that's it.
Oh,
It's like,
sure.
you need to have like a lot of scripts and a lot of ideas and a lot of be willingness to go the extra mile, at least when I was coming up. And I did. And so anyways, that led to hills and valley career in animation, where it
Mm-hmm.
would be like, oh, I got a job, and then 4 years later, I got another job. You know,
Yeah.
it would be
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yep.
And then it started becoming a little more regular. But then what happened with comic books was I was working on Supernatural at the time, but
Nice.
uh, uh, Dan DiDio wanted, he loved Warner Brothers animation. He said there was some good writing of the characters, so he called down and said, "I need a list of your writers." And so a bunch of us went into this crazy meeting about 5G, and I was like, "This is insane." And I remember I walked back to the office with Megan Fitzmartin.
Mm-hmm.
We were excited because I'd always wanted to do comics. I tried to break in a billion times.
Right.
And then I went to go meet Tim Sheridan and my friend Eric at a bar,
Mm-hmm.
and they were debating the merits of, like, should we do this? And I'm like, guys, if someone asks you if you're a god, you say
Say
yes.
yes.
Like, are you kidding me? This is gonna be awesome. And I'm always a little more positive, anyways. But that Dan left the company. They morphed that into Future State.
Yep.
I did a couple backups, but my name was on a list.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually Mike Cotton comes to me and he says, "Do you have any ideas for the Flash?" And I'm like, "Sir, I am a nerd of a certain age. I have
Yes.
ideas for everything." And I pitched him my kind of quantum leap Flash thing, and he's like, "Well, that's better than what we got." You know, and he goes, "So you're taking over the Flash?" And I'm like, "Okay." And that was it,
Man. And you know what I mean? You hit every single right button for me with that, like with those very words, like quantum leap. Huge fan of that.
You're right.
And Wally West in particular. Because
Yeah.
I mean Barry's great and all. There's nothing wrong with Barry. But Wally is my Flash because that's the
Right.
Flash that I grew up with.
Right.
Geoff Johns grew up with Barry. That's why it's his Flash.
Right.
I completely get that. But
Right.
the fact that you brought him back to a prominence that I feel like had been lacking for the character for at least a little while there,
Sure.
made me and everybody my age absolutely thrilled.
Well, and it was like, it wasn't just that like, in my mind, it wasn't just that. It was like, I didn't want him to be the human pinata for the DC universe anymore.
Sure. Right.
And so I knew that I immediately was like, okay, I'm going to retcon this Heroes in Crisis thing,
Yeah.
and I've had to do it like 3 times in this series, but like I laughed because it was like they wouldn't let me save all the people, and I was like, in my head, I'm like, I'm going to save all the people. Like I was so determined to go down that route of like, I'm going to do this whether you want me to or not, and I just kept thinking, I this is so cynical in a way, but I saw the state of Warner Brothers and I kept thinking, I think I can last longer than you guys. Like there was a certain element of like, somebody's going to leave. And then I will be like, yeah, this is what we talked about. Like, I'm going to just futz this until we get it done. And that was, by the way, that was the same thing with Super Sons, the Super Sons movie.
Yeah.
That was we had been pitching that for a while, and we had been told that theatrical was doing it,
Right.
and we could not touch it. And there's the minute it was like the week AT&T bought Warner Brothers. Rick Morales was in a meeting and he's like, "Listen, Jeremy and I just really want to do Super Sons, and they keep saying they're not going to do it because of theatrical." And it was like, theatrical may not have existed. Like, we don't know.
Right.
But
Yeah.
for whatever reason, it was like a Tuesday and they said, "Yeah, you can do it." And like, I had that outline in by Thursday
Nice.
because we knew they were going to stop us. Like, we were like, we got to get so far down that it would be economically egregious to do it. And so even with like the Flash, I was like, I'm just going to do this as much as I can. And then later I'm going to do it again. And I'm going to save all those characters. I was like, it has to be fully redeemed.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's just it. I mean, one of the things that's always drawn me to DC Comics in particular is the legacy aspect of it all.
Right.
The fact that it's not just this one character the entire time. It's that characters grow. They have families. They have lives, and you see them live out. And then if they get to a point where, the sidekick gets old enough to take on the mantle, that could happen for a while.
Right.
And then they might trade out in and out or what have you. But like you said, Wally West family was kind of sitting there in limbo for a little bit.
Yeah.
Because he himself was literally in limbo, and lo and behold, you're able to make the magic happen.
Well, and with them, it was interesting because as I was writing Wally, it's very much my slice of life. I have two daughters and amazing wife, and I'm an idiot schlub that has a very peculiar job, and but I found myself really ruminating on that. It was by the end of my run, I kept thinking, I was like, oh, Wally's the most well-adjusted superhero.
Yeah.
He has a family, he has a job, he has a career, he has a life, and he's a superhero.
Yep.
And so many, because of the way continuity is, different things, so many of the characters are stuck in kind of perpetual stasis. But after I was taken off of Flash and I was on Green Lantern, what I thought was interesting is like it felt like the entire DC universe was coalescing around legacy heroes.
Yes.
And here I am writing Hal Jordan, and I have this particular issue with him and Barry where they're really talking about their sidekicks growing up and being these kind of well-adjusted and taking the reins. And it was kind of fun to see Hal confront the fact that these kids are more mature and well-adjusted than I am. Maybe I should, take some steps here,
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And but that's another thing that you can do with Green Lantern is that, because there have been, 700 Earth lanterns over the years, you can mix and match. You could tell stories with different ones depending on which ones you want. The fact that you were able to ground Hal the way you did in those first couple of issues as well, working with the story and having him be back on Earth, and then eventually work your way towards, having other lanterns involved and having it be in space and all that. You remembered the core of the character in order to then bring others and other parts of the character in, and that's important in storytelling.
I think so, because when I took over Green Lantern, I had got a conversation with somebody higher up that said, just write a paragraph that everything went back to normal, and I was like, I'm sorry, sir, I'm a nerd. I can't leave the dangling threads after Geoff Thorne's run and just sit there and go, yeah, it doesn't matter.
Right.
It's much more compelling to me as a reader and a fan to go, dude, he left this giant source ball there, and the United Planets were there. And I think it was Chip suddenly a Yellow Lantern. And I was like, I'm going to take all that and wrap it up into a different story. But quarantining Hal on Earth was, part of that bigger story. And
sure.
Rightly or wrongly, I don't know. I just know that by the time I got to space, and I remember the first page that Zermanico sent back of space, and I was like, I'm a complete idiot. I should have been in space the whole time, because his art was so good. I was like, I'm such an idiot. I'm such a moron. I just kept hitting my head against the wall. Like, what was I thinking?
Well, but also at the same time, through the story that you're telling, also kind of giving a reason why there's so many damn Earth lanterns.
Right? but that's the fan in me, right? Like, I have to explain this.
Yes.
Because this is not, and I love the idea that the Guardians knew that humans were the cockroaches of the universe. They won't take orders well, and they're the designated survivors. That's why we've put all these characters around. And I thought that was fun. I thought that was a fun little way to explain, no. The reason they're doing this is because Earth is fallback plan A, but it made sense to me, because I don't know of any other lanterns that have so many of the same species,
And there really aren't. There really aren't. The most you ever get is maybe 2 of the same species outside of Earth. Yeah.
Right. And so, it was fun to kind of go have Tom Kalamaku be like, yeah, here's the designated survivor central power battery. But also, that's because you guys don't take orders, so you'll probably survive in case something, that power battery drops into wrong hands. That made sense to me.
And what also makes sense to me is the very obvious Star Wars roots that you're working with here, with the with the United Planets and all that. Clearly, there's major Palpatine energy going on.
Totally. And by the way, that was because all I do is steal. That's all you're supposed to do.
Borrow,
And,
borrow.
and yeah, borrow. But Philip Kennedy Johnson and I had become friends, and I was reading his Superman series too. And so, Tharos was a bad guy. It was all there. It was just, I remember saying to Philip, like, hey, can I just steal your bad guy? Because I had also seen that, Jeff Thorne had given the Green Lantern, Guardians had given Green Lantern control over, or United Planets control over it. And I thought, this is
Yeah.
great. And then the minute I found out they were shapeshifters, I was like, oh, this is even better. Like, like this is all coming together. Like,
Oh, yeah.
it was really fun. But yeah, I'm really grateful. I mean, Philip and I, ruminated on a lot of cool things. And even as he left, the John Stewart book ended, it's like we just grabbed all those toys too and be like, well, let's put them in here. Let's play
Well,
with that.
it's funny too how like accidentally you're kind of following a career trajectory similar to Geoff Johns because
Dude, I told him this. I said, do I have a punch card? Or something like next year, do I have to come up with like, the phantom, engineering, like my own imprint? Because I don't think it was intentional for anybody.
no.
And it's a double-edged sword, right? Because you're like, hey, I did the Flash, and now I'm doing Green Lantern, and now I'm doing Aquaman. And it's like, that's really cool. Also, everybody's going to judge me against Geoff Johns. That is not the thing that you want to be judged against ever, right?
Well, yeah, but at the same time, a lot of what you're working on is, I wouldn't quite say derivative. I would say taking a lot of the ideas to that next level, like with the
Sure.
fractal lanterns as an example, because like obviously the spectrum of different lanterns was introduced by Jeff in
Yeah.
his time, and now you're literally splintering that and creating these subsects, and that there's so much more within there that can be really dangerous
Right.
when brought into the wrong hands. Like that's a really fascinating concept, man.
I mean, that's the fun thing about comics is like being able to leapfrog off of something. What's
Yeah.
weird to me though is like between Jeff being on Green Lantern,
Mhm.
there have been multiple series
Yeah.
that I mean years. I mean,
Sure.
maybe a decade. I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to think the last time there was a Hal Jordan centric book, or that they were really heavily into the emotional spectrum. So it just felt like the right time too.
It
And
was.
and it was also a level of me like clean like me again. It's sort of like why Atlantis is gone in Aquaman. It's like I am not smart enough to handle this mythology. I need to make this a bit, like okay, I'm going to blow these things up so I don't have to handle mythology. And the same thing with Atlantis is like I cannot do the politics of underwater kingdoms. I will take it off the table, and therefore I do not have to do the politics of underwater kingdoms.
But if the opportunity arises when the time is right, then there it is. Like
Right. And reintroducing that stuff is always fun, and
yeah.
always like trying to find the next twist on it is fun too. So yeah, I mean, listen, but again, it's that feeling of like the first time I met Mark Waid was I'm at my home in Santa Monica, scrolling Twitter at the time, and I saw come on down to Heidi Ho Comics. Mark Waid is here signing, and I
Yes.
I moved as fast as the flash, grabbed my keys, said, I
Yes.
gotta go to comic books and everything. And I don't think my wife even heard exactly what I said. And I was in the car. I was at Heidi Ho, beeline to find Mark Waid and be like,
Nice.
hi, Mr. Waid, my name's Jeremy. I'm a big fan. And he was like, oh my gosh, I love your run of The Flash. And I was like, well, that's good. I can get in my car now. It was just like that was amazing. Like, thank you.
I imagine it's that picture of Spider-Man pointing at Spider-Man, like
Yeah,
I love your
yeah.
Flash run. I love your Flash run. Like
Yeah. No,
totally.
it was really. But I also had the most embarrassing signing. We did a signing at Heidi Ho, and it was Jeff, Mark, and me. And this is before I don't even know if I was like 20 issues into the Flash. There's no trades, and people are coming in with wagons for
Oh
Jeff and Mark. And then it would be like Jeff, Mark, omnibus, stacks. And then they get to me and they just like one sympathy comic that they put on my table. And I just be like, yeah, it's cool, and I'd just be cracking wise. And I'm just like, oh man, they should have just had me go first. So
yeah,
it wasn't, the pure embarrassment. of
Oh,
watching these
my
guys like literally pulling wagons of comics and then you know.
Someday you'll get there,
Yeah,
young
yeah, tap
like
tap, yeah, yeah, yeah.
exactly. Oh my god, were the fractal lanterns something that you had like kind of like in the back of your head for a while, or was that something that just kind of just like manifested when you got
It
the
kind of,
Green Lantern bit?
yeah, it kind of manifested because it part of what happened was as I was exploring, I'm trying to remember how exactly it happened, but the source lantern
Hmm.
that John Stewart had made on Oa, I had
Yeah.
always known A, that there were guardians inside, B, that Kyle was going to pierce the veil of that as a white lantern
Yeah.
because he's the only one that could.
Sure.
And as I kept thinking about the emotional spectrum, I was like, oh, this is interesting. um, the minute that Razor shows up and you're going, oh, uh, you know, the blue central power battery, very early on, I realized, oh, all the central power batteries are being destroyed and the United Planets is consolidating power upstairs in
Hmm.
space. And I knew that. I knew that. But it wasn't right away that I knew that it was going to really F up the emotional spectrum, right? And and then Nathan Broom grew on me.
Hmm.
I was like Carol's fiance. I
Yep.
I didn't want to write him as a jerk,
No, because
you
that's too
know.
easy. It's too easy.
It's too easy. And
Yeah.
and I was like, I kind of like this guy. He's done nothing wrong. He just got embroiled with the wrong people, you know, and even when they're in the Vegas, wedding chapel of solitude, I just thought the proximity to this emotional spectrum has to have some after effect. And I didn't want to just leave Nathan Broom to the winds of time, just the dustbin of history.
Sure.
And I definitely knew that the fractured lantern, I kept thinking like, oh, I would love if people started like manifesting energy because that happened with Sinestro, obviously. Sinestro manifests the red energy, and I thought, hey, this is a cool idea. But then it was like, what if we just go in a little slightly different direction and we start saying there's these, fractal lanterns, these fractures from the emotional spectrum,
Hmm.
and gave him this arc. And part of it was that when Carol became Star Sapphire originally in the Green Lantern series, the
Yeah.
Silver Age Green Lantern, Hal Jordan, it's like I just did that with Nathan. It's the same thing. I'm the foil to Green Lantern. I
Sure.
want this, and there was a conscious effort between me and then I was like, let's make Star Sapphire really cool, kick ass. It's not just Hal's girlfriend, but a substantial character. And so even when Mark was doing Justice League, we were sitting down. It's like, well, can we put her in there as like a legitimate superhero?
Hmm.
That's her own superhero that can stand on her own 2 feet, that can do her own her own thing. And it was kind of like, oh, maybe we can make some of her villains in the background. And so that the Sorrow Lantern and Sinestro really made me think about what else we could do. And there'll be some more that show up, but it's
Sure.
been fun to kind of like play with it. But also it's been mined to death too. So I like what colors exist? Like what can I do? What emotions can I do?
The Lucky Charms lantern.
Yes,
Clearly.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
But I love the idea that the Sorrow Lantern, his main operating procedure is like, I want this to stop. Like,
Mhm.
like I don't want this anymore. Like, and Fernando did a great job. Emo Lantern here, bad sack, poor boy.
Good Charlotte lantern. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 exactly. That's funny.
Oh man. Well, and
The Black Parade plays every time he shows up.
along with the great story that you've been telling in Green Lantern too, so many amazing creators as backups this entire,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
getting Maguire in there, getting
Oh,
Mars, like getting
oh,
Tomasi, like these pinnacle and pedigrees of the industry,
yeah.
all getting to be us on the same side of your story is that's got to be a thrill.
Well, I mean, I remember when I was on the Flash and they said Cotton, my editor kept bringing in these amazing artists to do little things.
Hmm.
And when we did a thing with Kevin Maguire where Flash jumps into the Reverse Flash in
Hmm.
the Legion of Superheroes, he's getting inducted. And
Yeah.
the only thought I had was, it doesn't matter if they fire me, I've won. Kevin McGuire drew something I wrote, I win. Like
Yeah.
it's over. There's no, you can't now, you can't take it away. Ha
Mm.
ha, And so I had met him at a convention, and again, it's me trying to pull fast words. I was talking to him and I was just like, we should do, oh my gosh, Kevin, would you do uh what did I say? It was Midnight Run with Guy Gardner and Lobo. It'd be
Mhm.
so awesome. And he was like, yeah, I think I could do that. And that's all I needed. And then I called my editor. I'm like, Kevin McGuire will totally do this thing, and you got to say yes. And it was like, no. And I'm like, shut up, we're doing it. Like I was really like, we're gonna do it.
Yeah.
And then it was like there was all these rules, like it couldn't be Lobo, and it kind of pulled back from that, but I didn't care. I was too far down the road,
Hmm.
with the idea that Kevin McGuire was going to draw Lobo and Guy Gardner, and I was like, I'm obsessed.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But even Ron with the Kyle stuff, like there was I don't know if it was right away that they were like, this is going to be a 30-page book or whatever it was,
Mhm.
but I remember going like, hey, this is more expensive, and the backups, it was like this could be a great opportunity to clue everybody in on where the other lanterns are
Sure.
and what's going on in the universe, and to bring back people that had a huge part to play in those characters. It seemed like a no-brainer, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And like Pete Tomasi, I've been to a bunch of conventions with him, and I'm a little starstruck because I was reading Jeff's Green Lantern and his Green Lantern Corps. Like that was must read reading every
Absolutely.
month.
Yeah.
And Tomasi never goes wrong. His Super Sons was obviously so impactful, and he's great head of hair, that guy. But he's such a cool dude. And but yeah, it's definitely like, listen, it's heady. I feel very humbled and like completely pinching myself. Like 8-year-old Jeremy is constantly screaming for joy because it should not have happened, and it's
And
pretty
it
great.
happened. It happened.
It happened, and it continually happens. And I'm like, holy crap.
Also, just because you mentioned Tomasi, I try to mention as much as possible Tomasi's Nightwing run
Oh
because
yeah,
that is I feel like it goes under the radar, but him working at the cloisters and like setting up his own life in New
yeah,
York, like that was a really unique take on Nightwing that not every other creator has done before. It's usually Bloodhaven or
right,
Gotham,
right.
and it gave him a little bit of a new lease on life for a little while there. So
I
that's
love that. I mean,
great
listen,
stuff.
he's an expert writer,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Like, I mean, he's just one of those guys that you're just like, oh, I'll pick up anything he writes because he's awesome. And he's an
Absolutely.
awesome dude. That's the other thing. That's the other thing that surprised me, honestly.
Mhm.
Just inside baseball is
Yeah,
like, uh, I've rarely met a creator that isn't cool.
that's
Like
awesome.
we're all kind of nerdy weirdos that just love this stuff. And I keep waiting for the pre-Madonna, you know, I'll just stay away. Like I haven't really met that guy yet.
That makes me very happy to hear, quite frankly. Because
Yeah.
I mean, I've met plenty of people at conventions and stuff like that, but there's still like a couple of like white whales here every now and then that I haven't quite gotten to converse with, and
Yeah.
we're all fans. When it comes down to it.
Super fans. What
Yeah.
like David Pepos, who's doing an amazing job on Space Ghost. Him and I got to meet Frank Miller together, and
Yeah.
it was like, oh my gosh, you could not be more Chris Farley in an elevator. Like we were such losers, but like sweating, and we're just like, oh my gosh, Mr. Miller, it's such great. Like it was like, and he was so nice to us. He was so nice, and for those brief moments.
Do you remember that
Yeah.
time in Sin City?
Remember when Bullseye stabbed Elektra? Remember that? Like it's just a complete idiots.
Oh
Complete
my
idiots.
god. I love it. I love it. I also love the fact that you have not forgotten that Kyle Rayner exists, and that makes me a happy camper because
Oh yeah. I mean, listen, it's interesting. Like the Kyle thing. Part of the thing that I'm learning about comics in general is like the pacing of everything,
yeah.
and having probably I could have moved up the calendar a little bit on not having Kyle weeping in the corner about the emotional spectrum being wonky, but him going Super Saiyan as a White Lantern, and
Yeah.
then that's kind of, I don't want to spoil anything too much, but that's kind of uh, uh, a little bit of he's a Green Lantern again, and part of that is because Green Lantern willpower to me is is the anchoring factor of emotion. Like
Yes.
that is in my own life. That's the reason I don't gorge on all the cookies is I
Mhm.
have to have the willpower not to have much greed. And
Back.
so it is the kind of like sheriff on the car of emotion. But the fact that Kyle has mastered all those, I think is going to come and play in the future. But it's really fun to see him. It was so funny. It was like my editor, Paul Kaminsky, had mentioned as we reached issue, I think 19, he was
Mhm.
like, well, let's zhuzh it up a little bit. Let's do a little, we can have a B plot with Kyle and maybe somebody else like Superboy or something. I was like, well, great. Then
Yeah.
they could go do an adventure, but can we bring Wonder Girl along? That was I was like, if we're gonna do this, let's Dawson's Creek this thing.
Oh,
Let's
absolutely.
let's triangle this, and like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But then we found out we couldn't do Wonder Girl.
Mhm.
And so I was like trying to figure out who it was going to be. And I thought, well, maybe we'll just come up with a new character as my daughter from the back seat. It's like, she should be a time bandit, Dad. She should be a time bandit and she should steal awesome things from time. And I'm like, that is gold, Charlotte. That is gold. And I was like,
Hey.
and because I love the character I helped create, Gold Beetle. I was like, yeah, she can be the enemy of Gold Beetle, and
Yep.
Gold Beetle's looking for her, and she's stolen stuff. And I'm like, this is awesome. And but it makes more sense when you realize it was going to be Wonder Girl because Fernando drew this like incredible thirst trap page of Superboy that I was like, that's a little much, man. And but if it was Wonder Girl, it was like, oh, you totally get it, but it wasn't. So now it's just like, well, this is intense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And man, the artwork in
Yeah.
general and the artists that you've gotten to work with
Ooh.
have really just knocked it out of the frickin' park on every one of these books. Absolutely.
Zermanico is just a genius.
Yeah.
Like I try to tell him that all the time. Fernando Pastor, for whatever reason, he has this unbelievable ability to see into my brain. So I'll write something and he will do it. I mean, he'll do it much better than what I wrote,
Mhm.
but it is always like, yeah, that's what I mean. And John Timms,
Oh my
obviously,
God. Tim's.
he's killing it on Aquaman.
Yeah.
And now between him and Dan Mora, there's something in Costa Rican water that creates superpowered artists that are incredibly nice human beings. But John he's so fast. He's too fast. I need him to slow down because I can't write that. But his Aquaman stuff is really great. The colors are great. The
Yeah.
inking great. Everything's great. It covers, the truth is,
Yeah.
it covers a multitude of mediocre sins. Is what it does. It's like I don't have to write that well. It's
Hey,
like,
hey, if you can have details filled in by an amazing artist,
correct.
but
Yeah,
by
yeah,
by
yeah,
all means, do it. But like
yeah.
the water textures
Yes,
and just the expressions on everybody's faces. John Timms absolutely blew me away on his Young Justice a couple of years ago
yes,
that he did with
yes,
Bendis,
yes.
and this is just like next level
Yeah,
stuff from him.
yeah.
It really
He's
is
so
incredible.
good.
Yeah.
He's so good. And the same thing with Zermanico. I remember like we worked on Flashpoint Beyond with Geoff Johns, Tim Sheridan, and I, and Zermanico was the Flashpoint artist for that. And it was just like, holy crap. We would just get art back like, holy crap, holy crap. And it was right when Green Lantern, or I was getting Green Lantern.
Mhm.
I was talking to Tim because I talked to Tim Sheridan quite a bit, and I was like, yeah, Zermanico's going to do this. And I heard him go, you son of a bitch. He was like, he was so mad because it was like, no, I want Zermanico. And it was kind of like, nah, and
Fine.
yeah. And I love working with him. And I'm constantly like, what do you want to do, man? Because I know that people have tried to steal him. I know that like they want to steal him. I'm like, I'll give you anything, Alejandro. Just tell me. Like I love that guy.
Oh my God! And now moving over to core. I mean, obviously not to give
Yeah,
anything away with that, but like now. The thing that Hal and Kyle have in common is both of them have restarted the Green Lantern Corps at least once.
yeah,
So
that's true.
yeah.
Yeah, no, and the Green Lantern Corps is fun because I'm working with Morgan Hampton and Fernando and Eau Claire, and but Morgan and I just kind of kicking around ideas, and it very much has to tangentially, it has to do with the overarching plot with the Sorrow Lantern
Yep.
and the Starbreakers,
Yep.
and that's great. That's all awesome. But we get to focus a little more on those individual lanterns. And the other fun thing is just getting, I mean, just twisting it a little bit and seeing who's going to be Lantern and rebuilding it. And I don't know. I'm having a lot of fun. And it's just going to get crazier and crazier and crazier.
I'm looking forward to it, man. And with Aquaman, I mean, also talking about what you said, that like, you could have very easily written a text box to get rid of what's recently happened with him, and all of a sudden he's talking to fish again. But instead, he's dealing with a whole new power set. He's got Mira essentially as his guide because it's her power set. And the mystery of what the heck happened to Atlantis unfolding around us. Like, you got a lot of good stuff to work with here. And I mean, what inspiration do you turn to for your Aquaman? Because I mean, there have been tons over the years. Obviously, Peter David, Geoff Johns, that sort of thing. Like, do you go for grittier Aquaman? Do you go for like somewhere in the middle? Like where do you think you fall on that?
Probably grittier. I mean, I think this is more grittier, but it's also me going into kind of a bit of a high fantasy mode, like I'm a big fantasy nerd. And by fantasy nerd, before anybody gets, like, oh, tell me your snooty tastes. It's like I remember I was sitting with a bunch of writers from Supernatural, and somebody was mentioning they had read, I think they had read War and Peace for the second time. And I looked at them and I said, the difference between you and I is so massive. And they were like, what do you mean? I go, I've never read War and Peace, but I've read 22 books about a dark ape elf named Drizzt Do'Urden. Like all the Forgotten Realms, all the Dragonlance, all the like schlock stuff. Like I'm that guy. And so this Aquaman is definitely more in that Beastmaster Conan mode, and I'm having a lot of fun doing it. And it is different because again, I with all these characters, there's always like a thought that sticks out to me. With Hal Jordan, it was like, I wonder how much money he has in his bank account. And I always thought like $13. I bet he's about $13. Like I don't
all right,
yeah, I don't think he has a lot. And then with Aquaman, I just kept thinking like, I wonder if he misses hamburgers. Like that was a weird thought I had because if he's the lighthouse son, it's different than Peter David's because Peter David, rightly so, did such a huge swing. It was it's Tarzan. He's raised by dolphins. I was like, I don't know. That's really weird. He's in love with dolphins too, and that's weird too, And but that's Peter David, right? Like, he would always swing for the fences for something really strange. So this was definitely drafting off of like Jeff's run, but some of the classic stuff, a dash of the Brave and the Bold, outrageous Aquaman,
Yes.
But I really kept thinking about this kid that was raised on land and about his internal thought life and about all the different titles he has, whether it's husband or father or king. And then I was like, what happens to that guy when we take it all away? Who's left? And it's really fun to see. He's a little more brutal. He's a little more he has one mission now to find Atlantis and his family. And I spell it out in the second page. It's like, this is a story about a god killer, and that's really what we're going toward. We're going toward somebody that I think at the end of this, I think of it as three different sections, but at the end of the first section, I think he's going to be one of, if not the most formidable superhero in the DCU. I think he's going to be slightly scary and also incredibly powerful.
Well, and I mean, it's not just the power set, but as you said, it's the personality as well, and the retrospective of having that land life and the sea life. Like, he cares about literally every living thing, and that's something that's incredibly unique to a character like Arthur. Like, you gotta roll with that while at the same time finding the balance between the two. Absolutely,
right. And it's just a weird thing. Aquaman's a weird character that some people really dig, and then some people are just like, wow, whatever. And there's that pressure of that weird pressure of certain characters where you're like, well, he's been able, that book has been able to sustain a certain amount of books, but not that many,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and that's as a creator, that's tough too, because you're
Oh,
like,
sure.
feel
Yeah.
that pressure. So I'm trying not to think too far ahead. I'm just trying to have fun telling this story, and that's all you can do, right?
Right.
Because it really does come down to sales. It comes down to if people are responding to it,
Mhm.
and you hope they do, but maybe they won't,
I mean, hell, I frankly hope they do because, like, I mean, yeah, I mean, I pick and choose like everybody else as to which run I'm gonna read and whatnot. But like so far, this has me in because, in the first couple of pages, it's like, oh man, I'm really bored with this whole king life, and then
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's like, oh,
Yeah.
so what do I do now that there's no kingdom?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
oh, whoops.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but I'm the same way. I mean,
Yeah.
that's exactly me. I tend to look at things and I go, I'll give you an example. Wallace West, right?
Mhm.
Ace
Yeah.
West, I started calling him.
Yeah.
It was like, I don't get this character because I wasn't reading it at the time.
Sure. Yeah.
And I knew they had written it about the time. I don't know if they wrote it before or after they had created a Wally West for the CW show.
I think it was that. I think they created Wallace first in New 52, if I remember
Okay.
correctly, but don't quote me on that.
And then it was like, and then they brought Wally back.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I hate as a fan is if you're going to create a character, like make sure that that character doesn't get lost in the shuffle. I like it when there are characters that are out there that are lost in the shuffle because it gives me an opportunity as a creator to go, um, why should I care about this character?
Sure.
And he got overshadowed by the return of Wally West too.
Hmm.
So you have Barry, you have Wallace, and then you have Wally, and he kind of got pushed under the rug a little bit as things started going. And I just thought, I don't really get this character. Why should I care about this character?
Hmm.
And that is always spins me out into, well, what would you do if you wanted to care about the character?
Yeah.
And I do that for everything. And Wallace was one of those people. Mr. Terrific was another one where I was like, once I figured out what I liked about them, like what I wanted to write about them, then they became like my favorite characters to write.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that happens a lot where it's like even with Aquaman, even Hal, I wasn't the biggest Green Lantern fan.
Mhm.
I like Green Lantern. That was my first credit on television, but I wasn't like sitting there going like, yeah, Hal, and immediately people were like, I hate Hal Jordan. It wasn't just people, they were like, I hate Hal Jordan.
I,
Right? Everybody was like, "Where's Kyle? Screw you. Give me
I,
Kyle."
I'm a Kyle guy. I
I
feel you.
know.
I mean,
I know.
yeah.
And so it was like, well, how can I write this to where I like Hal Jordan?
Hmm.
And the same thing with Aquaman. I think people like Aquaman, but they're also like, why should I care about Aquaman? That's
That
a different conversation.
that is an excellent point, and that is in general what a writer needs to do when they get on a book is they need to make you care about
Right.
Bip. Like, like, like,
Right.
like that sort of thing. Like they need to care. You need to care about the side character that you never would have even like thought about, and
Right.
make it work because they're in the book. If they're just there and not actually getting any sort of character growth, then why are you bothering to read it? Same with Aquaman as a main is he's not a laughing stock. It doesn't matter how many times people are like, hey, he talks to fish.
Right.
Like
Right.
he's so much more than that, and
Right.
it takes the right story to really bring that out of the character.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. I agree. And also like I think that you can fall into the trap very easily of just like putting too many characters in early,
Yeah.
like, and I definitely try to make a concerted effort. And again, I'm fairly new to all this, but like
Sure.
I try to make a concerted effort to concentrate on the main character. And you can bring some people in, but let me give you an example. Like Aquaman, one of the added benefits of having Mira not there is she's such a big part of his story, and
Yes.
she's such a big character that you can't once you put them near each other, it takes so much more focus off of Aquaman in terms of like now you want to tell both their stories, and that's fine. I just think that as a writer for right now, I need to concentrate and find out who this character is,
Yes.
and let the readership know who this version of the character is, so that when you introduce other characters, you're more apt to be like, oh, I have time to focus on that character now.
Hmm.
It's the same thing. Linda West was the character that I love, I love, but I had to follow Wally first and really concentrate on Wally,
Sure.
and then it was like, okay, now, and then I fell in love with the kids, and then it was like, and then Linda, started. I just, was like, oh man, I love this character, but I had time to do it because I'd done all the work on the main character. So you as a
Sure.
reader are like, oh yeah, I've spent a lot of time with Wally, so it's not that much. It doesn't feel like a cheat to go to this other character, you
Mhm.
know?
Yep, and the same could be said. I mean, now that you get to work with something like Green Lantern Corps, I mean, you can literally work with any damn Green Lantern you want to work
Right,
with. Like
right.
any of the ones that have been there over the years. Like, do you want a planet or do you want a squirrel? Because
Right.
both of them
Correct.
exist.
Correct. And that's super fun. I like the weirdness of the Green Lantern verse. And it was also fun to be like, Tim had done his Green Lantern, his Golden Age Green Lantern series, and then it was also fun to be able to pull that character in the Green Lantern for a tiny bit
Yeah,
before Lemire did JSA, and be able to, like, there's still kind of those threads between the books, which is fun to play with.
absolutely, absolutely, yeah. And I mean, obviously, we don't know where you're going next. I'm glad you are where you are right now. For now, both Green Lantern and Green Lantern Corps continuing under your belt. Like,
Yep.
okay, good. That
Aquaman, Green Lantern Corps with Morgan,
Yeah.
Flash Gordon with at Mad Cave, and
Yes.
yeah,
Flash Gordon. Let's mention that real quick, actually,
yeah,
because talk about one of those properties that you always hear it mentioned,
yeah,
and it very rarely gets the love that it so deserves, similar
right,
to an Aquaman or something along those lines.
right,
And now it's not just a Queen soundtrack; like
right,
it's actually getting its due in comic books. So,
yeah.
I mean, how do you take that on?
I mean, it's so funny. Part of it was just, again, like lack of self-confidence. So I was pitching some creator-owned stuff to Mad Cave, and they're not interested in any of my 30. But they were like, hey, we have some licensed stuff. Would you be interested? And they started like naming off stuff, and they mentioned Flash Gordon, and you can't not hear Queen when anybody says Flash Gordon, right?
Of
You
course.
just immediate, yeah, immediate. And I did an internship for De Laurentiis, who had produced that movie, and I
Wow.
remember watching that movie as a kid, and I like pulp sci-fi. I'm a big fan of Edgar Rice Burroughs' John Carter of Mars series. I love Buck Rogers growing up. Flash Gordon was in that realm of pulpy whatever, and I think at the time I was off, I think I just gotten canned from the Flash.
Hmm.
And I think I was like, they're never letting me write comics again. I better do whatever I can. And but I said, I'll do Flash Gordon, and they were like, yeah, okay, great. I mean, it was that quick. I didn't, and they go, do you think you can come up with like a plan? I go, I'll send you something tomorrow. And
Yeah.
I sent them like, this is my crazy plan. And they were like, holy crap, yeah, let's do that. And I was like, right. And so we were off to the races. And Will Conrad's been killing it.
Yeah.
And I it's been a lot of fun. And one of the fun pieces about it is that it doesn't have the burden of like a massive amount of continuity like DC does.
Sure. Yeah.
It's like there are the Alex Raymond comic strips, is that version of comics, but I'm also not trying to retell a comic. I'm not
Oh yeah.
trying to reboot it. I'm just going, no, no, that all happened. We're moving.
Hmm.
This is a sequel series. I'd much rather do that. I don't like rebooting things, and I don't like prequels.
You hear that, George Lucas? No.
Yeah, that's aged fun over time. It's funny. I
Yeah.
showed my kids. My kids wanted to watch Star Wars in alphabetic or chronological order
Mhm.
because I had shown them the machete order like a good parent.
Oh,
Uh,
as well you should. Well done. Well
as
done.
well, you should before they found out the Anakin spoiler, which is ubiquitous. You might as well just give up on that now.
Yeah.
But we watched it in order, and it was fascinating how much George Lucas was correct. Like I did not like the prequels when I saw it,
Yeah.
and then you watch it with kids and you go, "Holy crap, I'm totally wrong." Like
Hmm.
A, they love Jar Jar.
Yeah.
B, um, the reveal of Palpatine, it freaked. They were like, "Holy crap,
Yeah.
he's the Emperor!" Like they had no clue, and I was like, "Really?" And they were just like flabbergasted, And it was tragic. And so why we're talking about Star Wars, I don't know. One, two, three, and then we immediately went to Solo, which they loved,
Yeah.
and we went to Rogue One into New Hope, and what was
Oh,
too,
nice.
and
Nice.
it's a seamless transition.
It really
They
is.
were,
Yeah.
they were really sad about Rogue One. They were like, "This is sad." I'm like, "Yeah,
Right.
war is hell, kid, especially Star Wars." And
Yes.
then when we were on Empire, it was so funny because they're like, "Oh, Lando's here. We love Lando," and I was like, "Oh, because you saw Solo and the character now." So they're watching this in a totally different fashion than I watched it as a
God,
kid. So
this is so fascinating to me, and I'm so glad that you
wild.
brought that up because, like, yeah, like your brain can't parse, yeah, because clearly,
Yeah.
we're old enough to have it had it existed in a very specific way, but it's
Yes.
only a prequel if you've seen them 4, 5, 6, and that's
Yes.
it, yeah.
Yes, it's such a weird way that they consume it. It's so different.
Oh my God. And with Flash Gordon,
Yeah.
as you said, you do have carte blanche with that in a lot of ways
Yeah.
because, it's a franchise, but it's not like this, franchise that has 897 different iterations over the
Right.
years and everything needs to make sense in the end. As long as it
Yeah.
feels like Flash Gordon when you're writing it, then you're golden.
Right. Right. And it's like they got these great characters that they let me kind of twist and play with. And it's great. I've had so much fun doing it.
Yep. And for that matter, Flash and Flash Gordon. So, enough
I
said.
know. I was saying I need to get the EGOT of Flashes. I need a Flash Thompson book at some point, and
Mm-hmm.
then I'll really be rolling.
For that matter, Green Arrow has to happen now. Clearly,
Yes,
Green
clearly.
Hornet,
Yep. Yep.
just go the gambit on everything that you've worked with. Man.
Exactly.
Fantastic, Jeremy. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
So glad to finally have you on, man. And obviously, come back, dude. Like whenever the hell you
Yeah.
want to come on, we could just shoot the shit about anything. It doesn't even have to be about comics. Like whatever you want to do, I'm happy to talk, man.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, and you'll be hearing me in about 3 seconds with my outro and stuff because I'm doing that after. I'm doing it
Okay,
live.
all right, go.
All right. Wow. Damn good fun. Damn good fun. Jeremy is an absolute delight of a human being, and I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did to listen to. I did learn a couple of things that I didn't know before about his rise in the industry and how that all came about with the Dio and 5G stuff and whatnot. That was really really cool to hear, and really how he got the Flash job itself as well. Yeah, absolutely thrilled to have Jeremy on, and I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope that there will be more interviews like this to come. And yeah, man, I'm just in a damn good mood right now. So, what's to come for us? I'll pimp a little bit of what you should be expecting in the next couple of episodes here to wrap us up. Chris Nautis and I just attended Toy Fair, so we should be having a conversation on that trip sometime probably next week. So that'll be episode 244 when it is released. And from there, we will have this month's previews catalog conversation and all that. And eventually we're going to try to fit in best of. Because I know that this year is slipping away way faster than even I thought it would. But maybe sometime by the end of March we'll have done it because I know the Academy Awards happened already. So I mean that's usually the latest award show that happens. But ours may be happening a little bit later than that for 2024. We shall see. I'll keep you posted on it. But when it comes to previews, again, we're still kind of in flux with that. Bleeding Cool wrote an article at the day that I'm recording this saying that this may have very well been the last physical copy of Diamond Previews to ever be published this month in the month of March. So we will probably reincorporate Diamond's Previews catalog a little bit into the March episode when it is released. But for the most part, we're still going to do mainly Lunar, the individual catalogs, and a little bit of the Random House stuff. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be happening as well. And there may even be a couple of appearances of myself on other shows. I'm trying to work that out, but there might very well be a Back to the Bins happening with the fellas. And 100% looking forward to that when it does happen. So yes, you should look forward to that too, because good times are to be had by all. And with that, let's do an outro. Once I actually get the outro music up and running, that is. Here we go. And it's just me, so take it away, me. Email address for Comic Timing is comictiming@gmail.com. Facebook.com/Comic Timing is where you can find the Comic Timing podcast. And also make sure to join up to the Comic Timing Facebook group if you have not already done so for some good conversation about comic books and a bunch of other stuff. So that is a good place to go for that. We're also on Blue Sky at Comic Timing. We're on Instagram as Comic Timing Podcast. We're on Threads as Comic Timing Podcast. And of course, video versions of the show can be found at youtube.com/Comic Timing Podcast. You can find us there. If for some reason that doesn't work, just search Comic Timing Podcast on YouTube. And we're also on YouTube in YouTube audio form as well. For any of you who are just looking to listen to the show and don't have an Android alternative. So, you know, good times. Once again, thank you so much to Jeremy Adams for coming on the show. It was a damn good time. It was a thrill and a joy. And as always, there's always time for comics.